You follow every rule in a game you did not create, hoping your loyalty will be rewarded with freedom. But the bars of your cage are forged from your own virtues. What if the path to liberation is not paved with goodness, but with a terrible, calculated wisdom? There exists a morality that is taught to you from birth. It is the morality of the flock, the code of the subordinate. It is a system of virtues designed not to elevate you, but to make you manageable. It prizes patience in the face of injustice, loyalty to those who do not reciprocate it, and sacrifice for a cause that is not your own. It teaches you to believe in the fundamental fairness of the world, to trust that your hard work, your integrity, your inherent goodness will eventually be recognized and rewarded. You are taught that freedom is something you earn through good behavior, that the chains of control will be loosened by the very people who placed them upon you, if only you can prove yourself worthy. This is the great tranquilizing lie of civilization. It is the operating system of submission, a code that runs silently in the minds of the masses, ensuring they remain predictable, cooperative, and above all, useful to the interests of others. The man who feels controlled by a superior, by a system, by a relationship, operates within this moral framework. He appeals to a deaf judge. He believes his silent suffering is a testament to his character, that his quiet endurance will one day move the heart of his controller. He waits for a promotion that is always just over the horizon, for a change of heart in a partner who has already demonstrated their nature, for a system to suddenly bend its own rules out of a sense of justice. He hopes. And hope in the arena of power is a slow-acting poison. It is the most elegant trap ever devised, for its bars are not made of iron, but of noble ideals. You become a prisoner of your own ethics, a willing participant in your own subjugation, believing that to act in your own raw self-interest would be a moral failing. You believe that to be cunning, to be strategic, to be ruthless when necessary, is to become a monster. And so you choose to remain a victim, mistaking your chains for a halo. This is the ruin of the idealist. He sees the world as a courtroom where he can appeal his case. The prince, however, knows the truth. The world is not a courtroom. It is an arena. There are no judges, only other combatants and spectators, and in the arena there is no reward for noble suffering. There is only victory or defeat. The antidote to this poison is not a new set of morals, but a new set of eyes. It requires you to see the world as it is, not as you wish it were. This is the first lesson of Machiavelli. He is not a teacher of evil, as the naive would have you believe. He is a physician of power, a man who dared to diagnose the human condition with brutal, unflinching honesty. He understood that to break free from control, you must first break free from the mental shackles that make you an easy subject. You must learn the art of not being good. This does not mean you must descend into wanton cruelty or chaos. It means you must unshackle yourself from a definition of goodness that was designed to keep you weak. The prince understands that virtue and vice are not moral absolutes. They are tools in a workshop. A hammer is not good and a saw is not evil. They are instruments, and their worth is determined solely by their effectiveness in a given situation. Your compassion, your honesty, your loyalty, these are tools, but so are deception, severity, and calculated self-interest. To refuse to use one set of tools on principle is to enter a duel with one hand tied behind your back. The first step towards sovereignty is to grant yourself permission to be effective rather than merely good. You must look upon the power that controls you not as a moral entity to be persuaded, but as a force to be analyzed, understood, and overcome. You must shift your primary question from "what is the right thing to do" to "what is the necessary thing to do to achieve my objective?" This is the mind of the sovereign. It is a mind that has put aside wishful thinking. It does not concern itself with how men should be, but accepts with cold clarity how they are. And as Machiavelli observed with chilling accuracy, men have less hesitation in offending one who is loved than one who is feared. The entire moral system of the subordinate is built around being loved, being approved of, being seen as cooperative and just. It is a desperate plea for affection from the very power that constrains you. But affection is a bond of obligation, which men, being fickle creatures, break when it serves their purpose. Fear, however, is sustained by a dread of punishment which never fails. To be free, you must stop trying to be loved by your captor. You must instead make them fear the consequences of continuing to hold you captive. This is not a path of hatred. Hatred is a clumsy emotional weapon that will destroy you as surely as it destroys your enemy. This is a path of cold, strategic realism. It is the understanding that respect is a currency far more valuable than affection. The affection of your controller is a leash, gilded but a leash nonetheless. But their fear of what you might become, that is the beginning of respect. Comment sovereignty below to declare your first victory, and subscribe to learn how to forge the instruments of your ascent. To have adopted the mind of the sovereign is the first and most crucial victory, a revolution that occurs in the silent theater of your own consciousness. But a revolution of the mind is meaningless if it does not translate into a revolution of your circumstances. A king without a kingdom is merely a madman with a crown of air. Therefore, once you have granted yourself permission to see the world as it is, you must acquire the instruments necessary to act upon that vision. The desire for freedom is a universal sentiment, but the acquisition of it is an art form, reserved for the few who are willing to study its brutal mechanics. These are not tools of conventional morality. They were not forged in the light. They are the hidden instruments of statecraft, scaled down to the level of the individual's struggle for autonomy. They are the mechanisms by which power is not merely challenged, but dismantled and reassembled in your favor. These are the three essential instruments of your ascendancy. The first, and perhaps most misunderstood, is the strategic application of what can only be called the economy of cruelty. In the lexicon of the subordinate, cruelty is a sin, a barbaric act of aggression to be avoided at all costs. But in the pragmatic calculus of the prince, cruelty is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used skillfully or clumsily. Machiavelli makes a stark distinction between cruelties well used and those ill used. The latter are the acts that define tyrants and fools. These are cruelties that are repeated, prolonged, and administered in small doses over time. They do not secure power. They only breed instability and hatred. An ill-used cruelty is the manager who constantly undermines his employees, the system that slowly erodes its subjects' dignity, the relationship that dies a death of 1,000 cuts. It is a slow poison, and this, you must realize, is the very nature of the control you seek to escape. Your subjugation is a form of ill-used cruelty, a chronic affliction that drains your will and spirit day by day. To remain in such a state, out of a misplaced fear of causing a single dramatic rupture, is to condemn yourself to this prolonged agony. It is the greatest cruelty of all, and it is one you inflict upon yourself through inaction. Well-used cruelty, by contrast, is an act of profound strategic wisdom. It is surgical. It is the application of a single decisive and painful action, executed all at once, in order to prevent a greater, more prolonged suffering. It is the amputation of a gangrenous limb to save the body. It is the cauterization of a wound to stop the bleeding. When the time comes to break free, your action must not be a hesitant negotiation or a gradual withdrawal. It must be a clean cut. It is the resignation letter submitted without recourse, the final conversation that closes all doors to reconciliation, the launching of the rival enterprise that makes your intentions irrevocably clear. This act is cruel because it inflicts immediate and undeniable injury upon the existing order. It will cause shock, pain, and disruption. But it is well used because its purpose is to secure a final and stable outcome. It is done once, and it is done completely. As the philosopher of power states, injuries should be inflicted all at once so that, tasted less, they offend less. By concentrating the pain into a single moment, you prevent it from festering into a chronic resentment that will follow you. You give your former controller no time to adapt, no room to manipulate, no hope of convincing you to return to your cage. This single decisive act of severance is the truest kindness you can show your future self. It is the necessary violence that gives birth to a new peace, a peace founded on your own terms. The second instrument is the intellectual and moral courage to embrace the necessity of transgression. The system that controls you is not a random collection of circumstances. It is a structure with rules, codes, and expectations. These rules, both written and unwritten, are the very architecture of your prison. They are designed to ensure the stability of the structure, not your personal liberty within it. The expectation of unwavering loyalty, the unspoken demand for unpaid overtime, the social contract in a relationship that requires your perpetual deference, these are the laws of your specific dominion. To believe that you can achieve freedom while perfectly obeying the laws of your own confinement is the ultimate strategic folly. A prince who wishes to achieve great things, Machiavelli notes, must learn how not to be good. He must understand that the promises made under duress are not binding, and that loyalty to an oppressive power is not a virtue but a form of complicity. For you, this means you must be willing to transgress against the established code. This is not a call for chaotic rebellion, but for calculated and purposeful violation. It is the quiet act of using company resources to build your own business. It is the secret conversation with a competitor to understand your market value. It is the refusal to perform the emotional labor that has been implicitly demanded of you. It is the strategic decision to break a promise of perpetual fealty that was extracted from you when you were in a position of weakness. A prudent ruler and a prudent individual cannot and must not keep his word when to do so would be against his own interest, and when the reasons that led him to promise it no longer exist. The reasons you accepted control were likely based on necessity, on a lack of options, on a weaker position. Once you decide to become sovereign, those reasons are obsolete. Therefore, the allegiance is nullified. This requires a profound internal re-engineering of your own sense of honor. You must transfer your ultimate loyalty from your controller to your own future, to the sovereign you intend to become. The guilt you may feel is merely the echo of the cage's bars rattling in your mind. True honor lies not in serving your jailer, but in the audacious act of freeing yourself. These first two instruments, however, the decisive act and the permission to transgress, are powerless without the third. They are a sword without a hand to wield them. The third and most fundamental instrument is the wisdom of forging one's own arms. Machiavelli is adamant that a state cannot be secure if it relies on mercenaries or the forces of others. These auxiliary troops are useless and dangerous. They are brave before their friends, but cowardly before the enemy, and their loyalty is always for sale. This principle is the bedrock of individual sovereignty. You cannot break free from control by depending on the goodwill, the resources, or the intervention of others. To hope that a human resources department will save you, that a change in management will liberate you, or that a friend will offer you a permanent solution is to place your fate in the hands of mercenary forces. They will fail you, for their ultimate allegiance is to themselves. Your freedom must be built upon a foundation that is exclusively your own. Your arms are the tangible and intangible assets that make your independence possible. They are first and foremost your skills, not the skills your controller values, but the skills the wider world values, the ones that make you formidable outside your current cage. Secondly, it is your financial reserve, a war chest saved in secret, that gives you the ability to endure the chaos that will follow your act of severance. It is your network, cultivated not among your fellow prisoners, but among free agents in other realms. It is your reputation, built not on your obedience but on your competence and results. Forging these arms is the unglamorous, patient, and often clandestine work of the prince-in-waiting. It is the long hours of study after your duties are done. It is the relentless saving of every spare coin. It is the networking events you attend when you would rather be resting. Every moment you spend developing your own arms is a stone you are loosening from the wall of your prison. When your own arms are strong, you are no longer asking for permission to leave. You are merely informing your captor that you are going. Your power to transgress and your capacity for a decisive cruelty are directly proportional to the strength and readiness of your personal arsenal. Without it, any attempt at rebellion is merely a desperate gamble. With it, it is a calculated certainty. You have comprehended the instruments of ascendancy. You understand the surgeon's logic behind a well-used cruelty, the strategic necessity of transgression, and the absolute mandate to forge your own arms. But these are merely objects. A sword, a shield, a key. They are inert, useless pieces of metal until they are taken up by a hand guided by an indomitable will. The most powerful weapons are of no use to a man whose spirit is still enslaved. The next and most subtle phase of your liberation is therefore not fought in the external world, but in the treacherous, contested territory of your own mind and, by extension, in the perceptions of the one who controls you. This is the great performance. It is the art of wearing a mask so perfectly that it becomes a weapon, of reshaping your internal world so profoundly that it radiates an aura of power long before you make your first move. The first conquest, then, is not of your circumstances, but of yourself. Within you there are two warring states. There is the old regime, the conditioned self, the subject who has been trained for years to seek approval, to fear conflict, and to find comfort in the familiar patterns of submission. This internal entity is a chorus of doubts, a parliament of fears. It will counsel you toward caution. It will whisper of the catastrophic risks, and it will tempt you with the sweet, narcotic promise of returning to the safety of the known cage. The first act of the sovereign is to commit a form of emotional regicide. You must depose this internal ruler. This is a cold and lonely war, waged in the silence of your own thoughts. It is the battle to master your own impulses, to observe your fear not as a command to be obeyed, but as a piece of data to be analyzed. It requires you to surgically sever the deep, parasitic need for your controller's validation. Their praise must become as meaningless to you as their criticism. Your emotional state must be decoupled from their actions and anchored instead to your own unwavering objective. This is the forging of the inner citadel, a fortress of the mind where your true intentions are housed, where your strategy is developed, shielded from the psychological warfare of the outside world. It is here you learn to become indifferent, not as an act of nihilism, but as an act of supreme self-control. This internal victory is the most difficult, for there are no witnesses and no applause. It is the silent, solitary transformation from a reactor who is moved by external forces to an actor who moves them. Once this internal dominion is established, your focus must shift to the external. Your newfound will must be projected, but not as a declaration of war. That would be the move of a fool. It must be projected as a subtle, unnerving shift in the atmosphere. This is where you begin to master the architecture of fear while diligently avoiding the pitfalls of hatred and contempt. As Machiavelli so astutely observed, a prince need not be loved, but he must avoid being hated. Hatred is the product of rapacious and erratic behavior. It is born when a ruler or a controller seizes the property or violates the honor of his subjects. Hatred turns fear into a desperate, incandescent rage. It creates enemies who have nothing left to lose, and such an enemy is the most dangerous foe of all. Therefore, your actions must never be perceived as petty, vindictive, or predatory. You are not seeking to harm your controller. You are seeking to render their control over you obsolete. But equally, and perhaps more importantly, you must avoid being despised. Contempt is the assassin of fear. If your controller sees you as weak, ineffectual, indecisive, or harmless, they will feel no need to respect your boundaries. They will tighten the leash, not loosen it, because they perceive no consequence in doing so. Your task is to navigate the narrow channel between these two perils. The goal is to cultivate a profound, unspoken, and deeply unsettling respect. This is a fear born not of threats, but of competence. You must become a figure of impeccable reliability and silent effectiveness. Every task you are given is no longer an act of servitude. It is a performance. It is a demonstration of your capability, a quiet statement of the power you hold in reserve. You complete your work not just well, but flawlessly. You become the most competent, the most indispensable element in their system, all while maintaining an unreadable, professional calm. Your excellence becomes a subtle threat. It communicates that you are a person of immense value and that your abilities are a portable asset. You are no longer just a subject to be managed, but a force to be reckoned with. This quiet, relentless competence makes the idea of you leaving a terrifying prospect. It makes the cost of replacing you seem monumental. You are not threatening them with harm. You are threatening them with the vacuum your absence would create. This is the fear that commands respect, the kind that paralyzes your controller's will to assert their dominance too aggressively. For they begin to sense instinctively that they need you more than you need them. This brings us to the grand performance itself, the cultivation of a strategic and weaponized ambiguity. While you are building your inner resolve and projecting quiet competence, your true intentions must remain a complete enigma. You must become a ghost in their machine, a black box at the center of their plans. Your inputs are visible. You perform your duties. But your internal processes, your true motivations, remain entirely opaque. Your silence in a meeting, is it agreement or is it contemptuous observation? Your willingness to take on an extra project, is it a sign of loyalty or an opportunity to gain access to critical information and skills? Your pleasant professional demeanor, is it genuine or is it the dispassionate mask of a strategist gathering data before a decisive strike? This ambiguity is a form of psychological warfare. It denies your controller the comfort of predictability. Human beings, especially those in positions of power, crave certainty. They need to categorize you to understand your motivations, to predict your behavior. By denying them this, you introduce a persistent, low-grade anxiety into their mind. You force them to expend mental and emotional energy trying to decipher you. This expenditure is a drain on their resources. It creates a fog of war around your true position, allowing you to forge your arms and plan your transgression undetected. You are no longer a simple piece on the board to be moved at will. You have become a player whose strategy is unknown, a variable that complicates every equation. In this state of cultivated mystery, you are at your most powerful. You are still physically within their system of control, but your mind is already free, operating from a fortress they cannot see, orchestrating a performance that lulls them into a false sense of security, all while you wait for the perfect moment to execute the final liberating act. You have learned the unforgiving reality of human nature and have armed yourself with the forbidden tools of power. You have mastered the internal war and orchestrated the great performance. Now, before we reveal the final act of solidifying your legacy, ensure you are subscribed, for the ultimate wisdom is reserved for those who are prepared not just to know, but to act. The chasm between the eternally subjugated and the sovereign is crossed in a single audacious step. This is that step. The culmination of all your clandestine preparations, your silent study, and your iron-willed discipline has brought you to this precipice. This is the moment where strategy becomes history. This is the execution. It is the instant when Fortuna, that capricious goddess of circumstance, presents a fleeting opportunity, a moment of weakness in your controller's position, a shift in the market, a personal crisis that distracts them, and your virtu, your prepared skill and audacious will, rises to meet it in a perfect violent union. This is not a moment for passion. It is not an outburst of pent-up frustration or a cry for justice. Any trace of emotion in the execution is a contaminant that will poison the result. This is the apotheosis of your cold discipline. It must be an act of clinical precision, as dispassionate and final as a headsman's axe. The masterstroke, the rupture from control, is not a process. It is an event. It is a singularity in time. You have spent months, perhaps years, performing, planning, and forging your arms in the shadows. This has been the slow, arduous work of laying a siege. The execution is the moment the walls are breached. And as Machiavelli, that supreme strategist, taught, injuries must be inflicted all at once. The reason for this is a masterclass in human psychology, a series of small rebellions, a gradual withdrawal, a negotiated departure. These are the tactics of the weak. They are ill-used cruelties that prolong the conflict, that invite retaliation, that signal hesitation, and that give your controller time and opportunity to adapt, to manipulate, to bargain, to plead, and to ultimately reassert their dominance. A slow break is an invitation to war. A single, decisive, and irrevocable act, however, is a declaration of victory. It is the resignation that is delivered in writing, effective immediately, with no offer of a transition period. It is the launch of your own enterprise announced publicly, making retreat an impossibility. It is the final, calm conversation that does not seek to assign blame or relitigate the past, but simply states, as a fact of nature, that the old arrangement has ceased to exist. This act must be so total and so sudden that it overwhelms your controller's capacity to react. It shatters their psychological equilibrium. They were prepared for a negotiation, a plea, a conflict. They were not prepared for an instantaneous and total cessation of the reality they knew. By concentrating all the pain of the separation into a single moment, you paradoxically minimize the long-term offense. The wound is clean. It is cauterized by its own shock. There are no lingering ambiguities, no false hopes, no avenues for future manipulation. You have not asked for freedom. You have enacted it. You have not sought a new role in the old game. You have overturned the board and walked away. This is the point of no return, deliberately and strategically created by you. It is the moment the play ends and the new reality begins. It is the masterstroke. But the masterstroke, for all its terrible beauty, is not the end. It is merely the end of the beginning. To escape the cage is a thrilling act of rebellion, but true sovereignty lies not in the escape, but in what you build next. A prince who conquers a city and then celebrates without fortifying its walls will lose it by morning. The immediate aftermath of your rupture is the most critical and dangerous period. Your former controller may be in shock, but that shock will eventually subside, replaced by other impulses. Your task is to make any thought of recapture an impossibility. You must immediately begin the consolidation of your new state. This state is your new reality, your independent dominion, and its foundations must be laid with relentless speed and foresight. This is where you deploy the arms you have so patiently forged. Your financial reserves are no longer a secret fund. They are the treasury of your new kingdom, buying you the time and resources to operate without desperation. Your network is no longer a clandestine web of contacts. It is your new diplomatic corps, your cabinet of advisors, your early clients. Your skills are no longer a hidden asset. They are the pillars of your new edifice, the very source of your new power. The objective now is to create new structures, new systems, and new laws that are of your own making. You are no longer reacting to a system imposed upon you. You are architecting your own. You establish impenetrable boundaries. You create new sources of income that diversify your security. You dictate the terms of all new engagements. The immense energy you once expended on performance, on managing your controller's perceptions, on the internal war against your own submission, is now repurposed. It is now the energy of creation. This is the great and exhausting work of the sovereign, to not only win freedom but to administer it. It is the construction of a fortress so formidable, so self-sufficient, and so clearly under your command that your former world becomes a distant, irrelevant memory. The ultimate victory is not having to fight anymore, because the very structure of your new life makes you unconquerable. You are not merely a runaway. You have become a founder. You have not just left a job. You have abdicated a princedom of misery to found an empire of one. Here, then, is the final philosophical truth of this dark guidance. Power, autonomy, the overcoming of all obstacles. These are not things that are found or granted. They are things that are made. It is an act of political creation applied to the canvas of a single life. The universe does not recognize good or evil, only effective and ineffective force. The world is a river of chaotic circumstance, and you can either be a passive object carried along by its currents, or you can be a dam, a canal, a hydroelectric engine that harnesses that flow for your own purposes. To be free is not to be without problems. It is to have the power to choose which problems you are willing to solve. It is the transformation of oneself from a subject of fortune into a prince of one's own destiny. This sovereignty is not a permanent state of rest. It is a condition of perpetual vigilance. It is the throne you have built for yourself, and as any ruler knows, the throne must be defended daily. The struggle does not end, it merely elevates. And in this elevated struggle, for the first time, you are fighting not to escape, but to preserve the magnificent, difficult, and glorious state that is you.